Hello world, welcome back to Razor RC. It's time to do a review of the Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S BLX. This came out about 2.5–3 months ago and I picked one up, have been running it since. Been doing a bunch of different things with it: speed runs, general bashing, stunting with big flips and backflips and that kind of thing. So yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good feel for the truck now and wanted to give you my thoughts. So I'm going to review this truck in a bunch of different categories as usual, rating it from 1 to 5 stars in each category. 3 stars would be average, 5 stars would be excellent, and 1 star would be quite poor, of course. So here it is, the Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S. Now they also make a 6S version, which is a little bit bigger and obviously has more power, but this is based off of their 3S line, pretty similar layout, design, architecture, etc., but with some improvements that they made to basically beef it up and make it more capable. So it's got the standard 3S chassis that's also used on the Sentin, the Big Rock Crew Cab, the Typhon, and then they pretty much just kind of beefed it up. You know, they added this chassis brace, bigger shocks, wider arms, bigger tires, thicker drive shafts all the way around, steel spur gear. So pretty much just kind of an upgrade on the 3S line just to make it a little stronger overall. So this retails for $399 here in the United States. The 3S line is $300 and the 6S line for this type of vehicle is kind of in the $550 range, although you can get a Typhon 6S for I think $480. So this is kind of in the middle. I would consider it an intermediate level RC car. It does go 55 miles per hour on 4S, so it is pretty darn fast. Not really recommend for beginners, but more for the intermediate and higher skill level range. So first thing I want to talk about is the radio, and that is this, the Spectrum STX2. Much maligned, I'd say, radio. If you look online, a lot of people don't like this radio. This is a replacement for the TTX 300 that they used to use. TTX was a great radio. I also have another comparison review of the best radio in each class, and that was my favorite RTR radio. The STX2 really is just not quite as nice. Arrma got sold to Spectrum, or I'm sorry, to Horizon, which owns Spectrum, and so Horizon pretty much ships Spectrums with all of their RC cars, including the Arrma line now. So things that are good about the Spectrum STX2, it's got all the adjustments that you need, steering trim, throttle trim, dual rates, etc. Also has a nice throttle limiter, so if you want to run this at 50% power for your kid to drive, I actually did find that quite useful. 2.4 gigahertz, takes 4 AA batteries. That's good to see. So yeah, a decent radio, has a reasonable feel, doesn't feel horrible in the hand. Things I don't like are this plastic steering wheel. Responsiveness on this radio is actually also kind of vague, a little bit erratic, I think. Most people are not really going to notice, I think, but it is definitely not as good as some of the other radios out there. So in the radio category, I'm going to give it 3 stars. One thing I wish they had done was use the DSMR receivers. The receiver that comes with this is not compatible with any other Spectrum radio, so that again is a downside. Some of the low season stuff actually come with DSMR receivers and higher end Spectrum radios, so I would have liked to have seen that, but overall I don't think it's a terrible radio. I don't think it's as bad as most people say. I also don't think it's a great radio, but kind of average, so I'm giving it 3 stars. Next category to talk about is the build, and what that refers to is how this came from the factory. Were there any issues with this out of the box? Was I able to drive it? And my general thoughts on the build quality overall. So this came pretty well built out of the box. No issues plugging it in, driving it. It does not come with batteries or a charger, so you will have to add those yourself. It also does not come with a little a loop back plug. You really kind of need that. If you're running just a single battery, you need something to kind of loop around, so you can actually run a single battery. It comes out of the box only for 2 batteries, so that was kind of a downside of that. But overall, the build was quite good. Only issue I found was that one of the turnbuckles was backwards, so every turnbuckle's got a little line that tells you which way to flip it. They do orient one way so that they spin the same direction. One was off, not a big deal. Most people are not going to notice, but something I kind of noticed if you're super picky. So overall, the build was really, really good. Slipper was set correctly. No bolts or screws were backed out. Everything was filled correctly with the shocks. So I'm going to give it 4 stars on the build. Really, if they had included that loopback plug and set the turnbuckle, I would give it 5 stars, but really nothing wrong overall. It is a pretty good build out of the box. All right, next category to talk about is the design. And as I mentioned, this is basically the same as their 3S line with some added durability components. So let's just kind of go through it real quick overall. So they added 17 millimeter wheel hexes, which is really nice to see, although they use these kind of weird 8 millimeter wheel nuts that nobody else uses. So it would have been nice if they used standard wheel nuts for 17 millimeter hexes, but they did not. Maybe a cost savings thing, I don't know, but something I would have preferred to see. They do have upgraded drive shafts front and rear, much thicker plastic shocks front and rear with these nice little integrated guards. Really good design with the shocks where they basically are capless. You basically just use the bottom to unscrew or open up the shock so these shock caps cannot pop off. Integrated shock towers front and rear, beefed up steering knuckles also, so that was an improvement over the 3S line. A little bit of a weak point on the 3S line, and so it's nice to see that they've upgraded that. Down the center of the vehicle, they've got 120 amp ESC, a 36 by 68 motor, nice little fan on top. They're using the 15 kilogram per meter per meter or centimeter? I think centimeter, sorry. Servo from their 6S line, so a lot stronger, torqueier servo, although I did find it to be quite a bit slower. 128 amp ESC, which I'm pretty sure is a rebranded Hobbywing. Chassis brace, as I mentioned as before. Little integrated capacitor on the ESC. Dual plugs for 2 batteries. Battery straps will allow you to put in one single 3S or 2 series 2S batteries if you want to run 4S, which is what I typically do. Standard motor plate and power module from the 3S line. It's got a aluminum motor plate, which is nice to see. It's got a steel spur gear, I think an upgraded slipper as well. And then moving to the rear of the vehicle, obviously you see the big wing. You got the wheelie bar in the back. The diffs are plastic, just like the 3S line, so the ring gear, the sun gear are all plastic, although the diff internals are metal as before. Upgrade drive shafts again in the rear, although the center drive shaft is the same. There is no difference there. It does have the included bearing as before. So things I don't like, well, they don't have the adjustments as usual. The Arrma is not really known for having race type vehicles. You're kind of designed just to buy it, run it, and then just put it away and not really do any tuning or adjustments. Yeah, so overall I do like the design. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I think it's a really nice design overall. It's easy to work on. It's got everything you need, nothing you don't really. Nice power, nice design overall, and really, really good. Okay, let's talk about the performance of this vehicle. And as mentioned, of course, this is a 4S capable monster truck or truggy. It does go 55 miles per hour. I did test that on 4S. Pretty darn fast. For 55 miles per hour is definitely faster than pretty much the competition. So things I like about the performance: power is excellent, it runs cool, chassis is excellent also, it jumps and lands quite well, the shocks work pretty well, the tires work pretty well. The tires in terms of traction are not that great. On loose dirt I would say they're mediocre. These are really more like a street style higher traction type tire. If you're running on loose stuff, you might want to look into like the Outcast tires or some Badlands or something like that. So tires are mediocre, power is excellent, and jumps and lands quite well. It does do backflips. Longer chassis obviously makes it a little bit harder to do flips than something like the Outcast, but it is quite stable. I think the advantage of this over the Outcast, it is easier to drive, more controllable, but obviously does not do as many stunts in the air. Things I do not like about this RC car: the steering is actually really quite poor. There's a lot of factors that contribute to that. One is that the radio is just not that great. It is a bit vague, a little bit unresponsive. Servo is quite slow, as I mentioned. This servo from the 6S line, super slow servo. It has torque, but if it's really slow, it's going to feel like a really weak servo. It also has a very weak servo saver. Servo saver gives way too easily. If you're running on the street, you will notice it giving it all the time. It's not going to turn exactly when you want it to, depending on how fast you're going. So I think the performance in a straight line is excellent. On loose dirt, the steering seems okay. I mean, with the decent traction, it's okay. But if you're on any sort of high traction surface, you're going to notice that the steering kind of sucks. The other thing you'll notice is that at high speeds in a straight line, it does tend to wander a little bit. Again, that's due to the servo saver, the weak servo, the poor radio. So it's really meant just for, I think, low traction surfaces. If you're running on the street or doing speed runs, probably is worth it to actually look into a better servo, maybe a better servo saver as well. And I think you'll get a little bit better straight line performance. So overall performance, power-wise is excellent. And I guess Arrma is known a little bit more for their power than their handling. But because the steering sucks so bad, honestly, I don't like the way this thing drives. I'm going to give it a 3-star performance. It drives well in a straight line, but in terms of any sort of rear handling, I do not like the way it drives. Okay, Arrma is known for its legendary durability. The Arrma Granite 4x4 3S BLX was an extremely durable truck for me, hardly broke anything. Really, it's just like the bumper and the body cracked on me and stuff. But overall, the Granite was a super durable truck. Is the Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S BLX as durable? Does it hold up to the Arrma brand? I think this is probably one of the weaker trucks in the Arrma lineup. So they took the 3S line, they did beef up a bunch of stuff. The drive shafts are plastic, but they did beef them up. You know, bigger tires, longer arms, the chassis brace, etc. But it does have some weaknesses in my opinion. I did break a couple of things. First off, I did break the drive shaft when I was running on some loose gravel. Basically, a piece of gravel got jammed into the side of this thing, kind of made it hard to spin and tore up the drive shaft. Now, on like the street or maybe loose dirt, I don't think that problem would have happened, but I also don't think it would have happened if it had an aluminum drive shaft. I mean, the smooth aluminum drive shaft would just flick that piece of gravel off, would not have torn up. And so I do think that is a bit of a weakness. They did not upgrade the drive shaft on this thing. It still has a 3S drive shaft, which is composite and plastic. So that I think is a little bit of weakness. The other big problem or big issue people have been running into is braking arms. And so the front arms on this thing and the rear, of course, as well, are quite a bit longer than the Granite. The wheels are quite a bit longer and wider. So there's a lot more leverage being placed on these arms as compared to the 3S line. A lot more stress put on basically where they mount to the hinge pins. And I broke a front arm. Now, I was doing some crazy jumps at the BMX track, but I've seen a lot of other people also break front arms on this thing and doing things that I would not consider super crazy. So I do think the front arms and probably the rear as well are a little bit on the weak side and unfortunately do not hold up, I think, as well as they should be and what you would expect from Arrma. The last thing I don't like about the durability of this RC car, it uses metal shielded bearings. I still don't know why Arrma does that. If you're doing speed runs, the metal shielded bearings will work a lot better because you're in a clean environment. They do spin more freely. You'll get a little bit higher speeds with metal shielded bearings. But if you're running a basher in dirt, which is what this thing is intended to do, the rubber shield bearings are going to keep out dirt and grime and water and stuff a lot better than the metal shield ones. I would have liked to seen rubber sealed bearings on this, but they do not. So overall, I'm going to give the durability actually 3 stars. The Granite I thought was super durable and gave it, you know, basically a max score. This thing I think is not as durable as the Granite or the 3S line. Definitely has some parts that I wouldn't say are weak, but not really up to where they should be. So durability, I'm actually going to give it a 3-star rating, which is, again, not poor. I mean, that's average in this class, but it's not super beefy, not as strong as I think the Arrma brand sort of intends you to believe. Next category is support and maintenance. So working on this RC car is quite easy. As like the 3S line, everything comes out in sort of different modules. You've got the electronics module up front, just a few screws, you can pop this whole thing out. You've got the power module in the back, which again, a few screws, you can pop out the motor, the slipper, and the spur gear all in one package. Nice to see. The discs come out quite easily. You just basically pop off the shock towers and then you can pull out the discs. They come out as one unit, front and rear. So maintenance is really, really good on this RC car. In terms of the support side, Arrma is now owned by Horizon Hobby. Horizon is a good company overall. I've called them several times, had other issues that they resolved for me. So I am happy to see, you know, I do think they're a very good company to deal with and have very good support. But the downside of this car. And honestly, Arrma, the last couple years, they just don't have their parts inventory up to date. When this thing got released 3 months ago, there were not a lot of spare parts. You could not get extra arms. You could not get other various pieces. And unfortunately, the arms are such a weak point on this RC car that they really should have, at least had the parts available, and they did not. So they did finally actually release some more arms, so you can actually order them as of today. Actually, like 3 months later, you can actually buy arms again. I was lucky. I broke an arm. I had an extra that I bought off eBay, but really, parts should not be out of stock for months at a time. And if this were sort of an isolated incident, I'd say, okay, Arrma, maybe you had one problem here and there. But I had a similar problem with my Arrma Granite. The spur gear on the 3S line was not available for like months at a time, like 3 or 4 months, maybe even 5 months. I don't know, it was a really, really long time before you could get another spur gear for that car, which is really just not acceptable in this day and age. So in the support and maintenance category, I'm actually going to give it a below average score. I'm going to give the Arrma Kraton a 2 in this category, and it has nothing to do with Horizon, has nothing to do with how easy it is to work on. But if you can't keep parts in stock and people are breaking things, and something that's a really common part like an A-arm, if it's something weird like a receiver box or something that no one really needs, a battery strap, side guards, stuff that who cares, that'd be fine. But if it's a commonly broken part like the A-arms are on RC cars, then you got to have them in stock when you release the car. And if you don't, you're doing a below average job. So in the support and maintenance category, I do have to give this car a 2. Next category is value, and what I mean by that is how much are you paying to what you get. The Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S BLX sells for $399 here in the US. It's a $100 premium over the 3S line, and you obviously get a lot of upgrades, right? You get beefier parts, chassis brace, upgraded motor, a nice little fan. Overall, just a faster, higher performing vehicle, but it does cost $100 more. And honestly, I don't think these parts cost much more to manufacture than the 3S line. So the shocks, these plastic shocks compared to other plastic shocks, they're going to cost the same to Arrma. The electronics probably cost a little bit more, but the drive shafts are plastic. It's just a different mold. It's going to cost the same. So I personally feel like this is not as good of a value as the Arrma Granite. The Arrma Granite for $300 is a steal of an RC car. This thing at $400 is starting to creep into 6S range, and something like a Typhoon that costs $480, really only $80 more, but is way more capable. It's 6S capable, has all aluminum chassis, aluminum braces, aluminum shocks, just aluminum shock towers, just all around, I think a much better value. So Arrma is well known for making durable cars, high performing cars, and generally quite a good value. But I think in the value, this is not a 5-star rating. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I think at $380 it'd be like a really good value and in line with the other Arrma stuff. But this is just kind of a beefed up 3S, but it costs somewhere in between a 6S and a 3S, right? Even though performance-wise it's much closer to the 3S, the price is a little bit actually closer to the 6S line. So, anyways, on the value category, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I don't think it's a bad value. I think it's still a really good value, but just not the slam dunk, a really good deal you get with the other Arrma vehicles. Okay, so my final thoughts on the Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S BLX. That is quite a mouthful. I think it's a fun car. I think it's a really good basher overall. It's definitely capable. It drives through pretty much anything, has a high ground clearance, super stable, easy to drive, does backflips, pretty much is a good all-around basher. But I am a little bit let down by this vehicle because my hopes for this thing were a lot more than what I felt like I got, right? The value is pretty good, but not the amazing value as the 3S or 6S line. The durability is good, but not awesome or amazing like Arrma is known for, right? The front arms break a little bit too easily. Center drive shaft, I broke. Overall, the car I think is not quite where it needs to be to live up to the Arrma line or the Arrma name, so a little bit disappointed by that. I'm also really disappointed by the part support for this. Arrma is a big brand. you know, arguably maybe one of the biggest brands in the basher segment. You have Losi and Traxxas, but Arrma really is up there nowadays. They're owned by Horizon Hobby. There's really no reason parts should go out of stock or be unavailable. I mean, Losi stuff kind of goes out of stock for a while, but it comes back in within a month or so. If things are sitting around for 3 months, especially after you release an RC car and you can't get arms for 3 months, I mean, that's just ridiculous and unacceptable in my part. So while I think this is a good and fun truck, I'm just kind of let down by where I think it could be or should be, especially as compared to my Arrma Granite. My Arrma Granite was an amazing truck. Parts again for that was not great, but I don't think it had as many weaknesses as this RC car. This one's a little more fragile with the longer arms and the bigger tires and stuff. Also, the steering handling, I think, is just not quite as good. They need a stronger servo saver, maybe a faster servo as well. People don't like this radio, and I'm not going to bash it for the radio, but it would have been nice to see a $400 car would come with a DX2E. So something like the Losi Tenacity, again, is $350, and it comes with the DX2E and like a $70 receiver. So why does this car not come with the Spectrum DX2E? That would have been a nice improvement. So overall, I like this car. I'm not super pumped or hyped about this thing. I think it's a good car. There are definitely worse choices in this price range. I'm not sure there's really better choices in this price range, but overall there are some categories where I think this RC car is really, really good, and others where I think it kind of disappoints. So anyways, that's my thoughts on the Arrma Kraton 4x4 4S BLX. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, hit the add notifications button, and look for more videos soon.